Hey, this is a different kind of superhuman radio show. This is a different kind of Blueprint Power Hour because for those of you who pay attention to the occasional Facebook Lives that I do, our server went down. Let me bring Rob Regish in here also. Hold on a second here. Our server broke down. Let me get this out. And as a result of that, we could not produce a traditional superhuman radio show today because we're waiting for our new server to come in and get set up. And so we're doing this Facebook Live. And there's no music. There's no commercial breaks. Rob, you're on. We got your mic hot. We can see you.
Yeah, this is going to be a weird show. Huh? No music, no commercials, no nothing.
I'm just going to mention some sponsors from time to time where appropriate. And we're just going to roll with this because it's all about serving the audience. And the audience has questions that they've sent in. And Coach Rob is going to answer them. Do we have anything we need to talk about before we get started, Rob? Any upcoming specials with Mass Pro Synthogen or anything like that?
Well, we have a Synthogen status update. It is still out of stock. However, pre-orders are being taken, and it'll be first come, first serve when it does get in stock. I am told it is, last I knew, it was going to be about 2 weeks, maybe even a little bit less. But needless to say, first come, first serve. So if you need it, get your pre-order in. And as soon as it is available, I'll certainly announce, or in stock rather, I will announce that here.
Yeah, I can't get over the number of people that I've received emails from asking me about a status update. It's like they're going around you because they're thinking maybe I know something that you're not letting on. And
I won't be able to get a bottle for the longest time because me and John Drake, CEO of Mass, we have a policy, customers first. So until that cash gets cleared out of people who've pre-ordered, I'll be out of it too, and it's no fun.
Well, luckily I'm not out of it because I have now taken Elisa's bottle. I don't think she realizes it, and I started mooching off of her, and that's what good boyfriends do. So
has she used?
What's that?
Has she used it?
Yeah, but she uses 3 caps at a time.
Yeah, you need.
I take 6 before and 6 after, and it's just amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Mike Stagelich says, "What are your thoughts on tackling arthritis? I have it pretty bad in both knees, which is really limiting my lower body work." I have some opinions on this too, so you go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because I went to the orthopedic, let's say last week, very first time I've ever gone to a doc. But I went there for a look at my right elbow, and he diagnosed me with moderate to severe arthritis through the x-ray right up there and showed me where the cartilage should be. And there's pretty much nothing there. But, at first it was a pretty big blow to me. And I guess it's always going to be there. From what he's saying, there's not a lot that they can do for it. But be that as it may, it has been my policy for many years now. There is always something that you can do about it. It just takes a little knowledge and creativity. So I will say that if you're going to get arthritis, having it in an elbow is probably the best place to get it if that exists. But think about it, right? If it's in your knees or if it's in your hips or anywhere in your lower body, it means your weight is always going to be bearing down on it. So it's always going to be hurting. At least in my instance, it only hurts when I go to, do a pushing type movement. But let's review a little bit about what arthritis is, and then we can tackle how best to treat it. Arthritis is not, as it turns out, a single disease. It's an informal way of referring to joint pain or joint disease. And I was shocked to learn this, there are more than 100 different types and related conditions. People of all ages, sexes, and races can and do get arthritis, and it's a leading cause of disability in America. More than 50 million adults and 300,000 children have some type of arthritis, so it's not always an old person's disease. It is most common among women and occurs most frequently as people get older. But okay, so that gives us a little bit of knowledge about what it is and what to do. Osteoarthritis is the most common type, and that appears to be what I have. It's when the cartilage, that's cushioning surface at the end of bones wears away, bone rubs against bone, which is what I've experiencing, pain, swelling, and stiffness. Over time, joints can lose strength and pain may become chronic. Risk factors include excess weight, family history, age, and previous injury. And I did have a previous injury, which I'll get into a little bit later. Important to point out, I lost a lot of time on this thinking that it was tendonitis. It is not. Had I known it was arthritis, I could have started doing things for it long ago. So step number one in this will be doing what I can to rebuild cartilage. And the best product that I recall reading about was GLC 2000, and it's still a great product. I also texted you, Carl, and you had mentioned actistatin.
So GLC started out with a superior blend of glucosamine and chondroitin isoforms, and the ones that directly influence molecule for molecule the production of hyaluronic acid, because ultimately hyaluronic acid is what increases chondrocyte production and bathes the meniscus in slippery fluid.
Right.
But since then, they developed something called actistatin. And in fact, if you look, there is a jockey who's been on my show, and his name will come to me, Gary Stevens, who had taken so many falls that they said he would never ride again. And at his advanced age for a jockey, like in his early 50s, I believe, he started riding again, and he attributes it all to actistatin. And in fact, when you see him ride, he has the word actistatin on his leg,
Wow.
running from his boot up. Actistatin is possibly the most advanced joint formula on the planet. It has like 7 patents. I kid you not. And I don't think it gets the respect it deserves, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the bottle looks like bodybuilder Godzilla. You know what I mean? It's like it's this ripped guy with chains, and it's like actistatin. And people don't realize that this is the best joint formula in the world. They think it's some bodybuilding supplement. And I really think that Sean Madeir, if the only criticism I could cast on this guy, because he's brilliant and he's fair and he's honest and he's decent, is why did you go with that bright yellow bottle with the bodybuilder with the chains around his neck? Like, you know how many people looked at that and looked away? They didn't even want to know what it was after that.
Yeah, you got to go a little more mainstream, right?
Yeah, man, it's a great product. If you're worried about your joints and you take a glucosamine chondroitin type product, and I'm not talking about adding collagen or gelatin to your diet. That's another thing that you should do. Yep. But if you're taking like a glucosamine chondroitin type product and it's not actistatin, you're actually minimizing your ability to overcome your problem.
So you have used both GLC 2000 and actistatin?
Yeah, because GLC 2000 was what he started out with, and then I took actistatin before it was even available, when he was just experimenting with it.
Yeah, I remember that a long time ago.
I mean, I felt changes in my joints in days.
That's great. Well,
and you know me, I take more than is advised.
Right.
And he says 3 in the morning and 3 at night. I take 6 before my workout and then 3 later on in the day. So I take a little bit more than is advised, but it works. The stuff is legit.
That's great. Well, I've got both on order, so I can't wait.
Yeah, actistatin is great.
Anything's got to be better than what I've got going on now.
I just want to chime in real quick, and since we have no commercial breaks, this is really cool. Today's show, we're kind of flowing here. I want to chime in about a couple of things real quick about arthritis. Number one, arthritis is not a disease of mechanical load-bearing stresses. Arthritis is a disease of a type of inflammatory agent that specifically attacks chondrocyte in your joints. It's important to understand this. The linkage between being overweight and developing osteoarthritis is that your body is an inflammation machine. it is making inflammation constantly. We see this in why does a person get arthritis in their hands? They're not walking on their fingers. Why do they get it in their neck? Their head really doesn't get that much heavier. So we see arthritis developing in overweight people in non-weight bearing joints because it's inflammation driven. So anything that reduces excessive inflammation is critical. The other thing is growth hormone, growth hormone, growth hormone. If you have meniscus that's wearing out, direct injections of growth hormone into the joint have shown where there was no meniscus left, it was bone on bone, new blood vessels, and new chondrocyte fibers actually growing out of the bone. We did that show how many years ago with Dr. Allen, what's his name, from Florida, IAGA, intra-articular growth hormone therapy. You go down there for 3 days and he sends you home, and 6 weeks later your meniscus is growing back.
Wow.
And now add to that PRP and stem cell. There is no reason to live with osteoarthritis today, but you can't just get these therapies and go on living your life the way it was, because it'll just wear out again. What you need to do is you need to first arrest the inflammation that's driving your body eating its own meniscus. And when that's gone, then you use these therapies to regrow the meniscus, and you live your life with your joints instead of some metal alternative. Tony Picus just says, need my Mass Pro ASAP. Yeah, I don't know if he heard the beginning of the show, but it's coming. And John Peaks, who drives all over the country, is checking in from Little Rock, Arkansas. John, you're not far from Louisville. Drive through, man. Come on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So those are all great points. And
and you don't have to live with it.
Yeah, I'll be taking advantage of that too. Yeah. So step number 1, GLC 2000 and/or actistatin. And then the other important thing to do is to find movements that don't aggravate or aggravate as much the arthritis. Now, I will tell you that the older you get, the number of weighted movements that you use is going to dwindle. It's just how it is. Although your muscles, you can train them to get larger and stronger, it's the connective tissue will ultimately let you down. It just becomes more brittle over time. This is one area where you really need to start experimenting with body weight movements. And for a lot of people, they've got the arthritis in their knees, which is worse than having, let's call it a bad back, right? Because you can still train your legs with things like hip belt squats if you've got a bad back. If you can't bend your knee, you're out of business in the squatting game. Body weight movements, body weight squats, whether that's the traditional two-legged version, whether that's Tabata squats, one-legged squats, aka pistols, there's plenty of room to grow there. You may also want to ascertain whether or not pushing and pulling a heavy weighted sled like a prowler causes you pain, or perhaps it's a movement that you can do that doesn't cause pain. Usually it's not as much of an issue, because unlike the squat where you've got axial or vertical loading, the loading on the sled isn't vertical, it's horizontal. So experiment, and in time you should identify at least 3 to 5 of those exercises you can still perform and grow with. It's going to be an interesting experiment for me, and I'll be updating everyone here as to how that goes, especially with those 2 products. Can't wait.
Jim Rogers says, what do I need to do to get a big neck? Are deadlifts enough? Because I see a lot of guys who deadlift have big necks. Yeah, that's an interesting question, huh?
Of all the muscle groups people should train but don't, it's the neck. I mean, think about it. Your neck is on display every day of the year, whether it's summertime or winter. You can't hide a weak neck, and training it is a virtue for a lot more than vanity's sake. So a thick, powerful neck, first and foremost, it really sends a message to other people. Don't mess with me. That's what
I almost think it's kind of like you look like a bull when you have a big, thick neck.
Yeah, I mean,
and think about it. Think about how significant the neck is in conveying male power, right? When you want to insult somebody, what do you call them? A pencil neck. They've got a little thin neck, right?
Yeah, in man and beast, like you said, it sends a message.
Mm-hmm.
I can recall reading George Jowett was an old-time physical culturist, and he once remarked, if I want to know how strong somebody really is, I look at their neck.
Interesting.
And he said, a thick neck signals power and virility, and he's right. It also very efficiently conducts nerve force. And as I've said many times on this show, it's the nerve signal, right, that originates in the brain, runs down through the neck and the spinal cord to the muscles, telling them to contract. The stronger that, the stronger that electrical signal, the stronger you will be, period, end of story. Unfortunately, in most people that I've seen, deadlifts aren't enough. Yes, they'll do a great job building the traps, but the traps are only one muscle group contributing to that yoked look. Let's see. Okay, a neck harness.
Mm-hmm.
A neck harness is a solid investment. You can really up your game with one. The one caveat I'll give you is not to go crazy with the weight. The neck, believe it or not, really doesn't need a lot of resistance to grow. In fact, it's probably one of, if not the easiest muscle to grow for most people, largely because they've never trained it. Working the front and the rear of the neck with a harness, and making that yes motion with your head, that's pretty easy. Where I ran into trouble with the harness and weights was when you go to train the sides.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I highly suggest choking a resistance band around an upright, like the corner of a power rack, and working the sides of your neck with the band and the neck harness versus weights. It just lends itself to, I think, much better resistance, but also, it's not as cumbersome. Just picture, you've got a dumbbell hanging off this end of your neck. And,
and there's a point where neck training becomes reckless, and and the line between neck training being effective and neck training being reckless is really, really thin. It all comes down to how you move your neck. And I don't personally think side to side work on the neck is worth it. I think you train the extension and you train the flexion, but you train the flexion straight on with your forehead. You're still hitting those two big, thick rails that you're going to be building by going sideways.
Yeah, for the longest time, I just did, forwards, backwards, and that was plenty.
Yeah.
Now, you will find some gyms, mine's one of them, where the four-way neck machine, they have a four-way neck machine. I do use that. I've got one heavy day, let's say working all four sides of the neck, and one light day every week. It really does a really nice job of developing the neck. Top range rack pulls, while not directly working the neck, they build those mile-high traps. So you'd be wise to incorporate those too. I also like wedging a ball. Every so often, I'll just wedge a ball in the corner and press into it with maximal force, with your forehead, and then turning around, doing it with the back of your neck and the sides. So in other words, that's a form of static training.
Yeah.
Press as hard as you can for 5 to 10 seconds. It's a great change of pace, and you believe me, you'll feel it. Otherwise, bridging on the neck, is a time-honored neck builder. One look at any wrestler will verify that fact for you. Their wrestlers are one of the few athletes that still bridge, and their neck development is usually off the charts. You can start by placing your forehead on the ground with your arms behind your back, and at first, just sit on your knees, and get used to it. So you start to build up some of the neck strength necessary to pull off this movement. Later on, you can go up on your toes, right, with your arms behind your back and your butt up in the air, and your legs spread. And again, that in that instance, your forehead is pressing onto the ground into a mat. Work up to a 3-minute hold in that position, and it'll really give you a big neck, especially from the front. Likewise, you can bridge with the top of your head on the ground, arms crossed across your chest, and your feet pressing off the ground, either on the balls of your foot or keeping your feet flat. That works the back of your neck. There are some people that say, do it all the way to the point where you can touch your nose to the ground in that position. I'm not so sure
Not necessary. Not necessary.
That's not the best advice.
No.
Again, build up to 3-minute holds in that variation too. Will work wonders. So those are all ideas. You should rotate through all 3 or 4 and
go slow.
Pardon?
Go slow with all of these. Don't. Yeah, because the cervical spine is very, very delicate.
Yeah,
very delicate.
You're extremely good. Obviously, a neck injury is extremely debilitating. So go slow, enjoy it, and in short order, really, within the first month of somebody dedicating themselves to some neck training, you're going to see some pretty visible, impressive results.
We have to answer a couple questions real quick. First of all, Tony Pica says, I missed the beginning of the show. When will it be available? He's asking about Mass Pro Synthegen.
The last word that I got was it was 2 weeks from, let's call it yesterday. So, if it gets there sooner, I'll certainly, whether I'm on there or not, I'll flip you a note, Carl, so maybe you can alert the audience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
But, it's just one of those items that it is extremely popular, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen where it's sold out. Some people think this is a marketing gimmick. Yeah, it's not. At least one of the ingredients for Ponscum carthamoids extract, that, you're waiting on nature for that. It's harvested once a year in Russia in late August, and that's it. So whatever you got from that crop is what you're working with for stock for the rest of the year. Yeah. And in this instance, it just sold out again.
Hey, Rob, we also have a comment from Jeff Clifton. He says, Rob is an encyclopedia of training information. Carl, Rob, and Dr. Jeff keep me motivated. Everyone should go to Patreon and support SHR. Great investment. It's funny you say this. Before today's show, Rob and I were talking. And, the whole .com thing really hurt Superhuman Radio because we've lost a lot of advertisers whose banner ads and spots are still running because I didn't want to just pull them all off because something happened to .com because of my personal life. So I figured, I'm just going to let their advertising go and repay them anyway for their patronage when they were with me. And I said to Rob, if every one of my listeners joined Patreon, I wouldn't need advertisers anymore.
That's amazing.
I really wouldn't. I really wouldn't. And I think we have a measly 40-something patrons on Patreon right now.
Wow.
And what's the beauty of Patreon? Well, commercial-free Superhuman Radio. What does that mean? I know a lot of people fast forward through the commercials. It's no secret. You don't have to no, we don't want Carl to know. I know because they tell me. They're like, they get mad when it doesn't fast forward the right way, And so Patreon is a great. Everybody used to complain about the commercials, which we have none of today. And when I got Patreon, there was no mad rush to go over there. So I guess free is better. All right. So thank you very much. But by the way, Jeff Clifton, thank you for the show of support. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
David McGuire says, "Hey, Coach. Last time I came to you, you helped me tremendously. I'm actually seeing a specialist for TRT in a month's time, thanks to the SHR show you did and your advice. But today I come to you with another ordeal. My brother has degenerative disc disease, a bulge. Dude, this. I'm all over this too, because that's what I'm going through. A bulge in his L4, L5, while possibly not confirmed, to have ankylosis spinodiphilus, whatever the hell it is, snuffleupagus, So naturally, I did some research on alternatives to painkillers, as the physio and chiro hasn't really helped him. When I came across peptides, in particular BPC 157 and thymosin beta 4, otherwise known as TB500, and potentially GHRP6, I've read that they can help with some injuries, but would this be a viable aid, in your opinion, for him? I know you're not a doctor by any means, but his medical aid is, for lack of better words, useless at this point in time. Thank you for any advice and consultation. I know you have suffered from chronic back pain in the past.
Yeah, first and foremost, those words mean a lot to me. The fact that I've helped you in the past, that really encapsulates everything I think this show is about. Now, with respect to degenerative disc disease, bulging L4, L5 issues, most doctors, when they're dealing with that, have a two-pronged approach, at least from people that I've spoken to. They'll either recommend surgery or worse, painkillers, sometimes both. In terms of pursuing surgery, the people I have spoken to seem to be split 70-30. 70% of them either report little to no improvement, and 30% tell me it helped. Now, it could be just the people I'm talking to. It could be closer to 50-50. But either way, there are no guarantees. And once they start shaving discs down and inserting cages, etc., all bets are off. Even if it alleviates the pain, you're probably going to be resigned to a glass back, right, for the rest of your life. So a word, though, on painkillers, because I have clients that are going through this now, very interesting situations, and their dealings with painkillers and doctors. By now, everyone should know, right, where the opioid epidemic starts in this country, at least a lot of times. Legal drug pushers, doctors, okay? Doctors prescribe them.
And I want to just say something real quick, Rob.
Yeah.
And don't think that this has not been an opportunistic driven growth of a segment of medicine. Because I know a guy who convinced his brother to leave the state his brother was living in and move to the state that this guy lived in, because they had very laxed prescriptive policies in this state, to open up a pain management clinic where he knew all they would be doing was writing scripts. And they ended up with 4 of these pain management clinics in a given state. And all they're doing is their whole business is, you come in, you have pain, we write you prescriptions for opioids. And they have become multi-millionaires, these guys.
Wow.
So don't think like the medical orthodoxy wants you to think that this opioid addiction process has been just organic and it's so sad. No, there are companies out there that saw this and said, we're going into the opioid prescribing business because there's hundreds of millions of dollars to be made in a single marketplace.
Yeah. No, there's no question about it, and even beyond the addiction issues, if you think about it, drugs only mask the pain and inflammation. They don't correct the underlying problem. So, for example, NSAIDs. Those can cause folic acid and vitamin C deficiency. What are those two things used for? Well, both of them are critical for the body to be able to actually repair damaged cartilage, joints, tendons, and ligaments, etc. If you really need a painkiller, and I've got a couple of customers now, or clients that I train here in Massachusetts, they, instead of using these opioids and other stuff, they're getting a script for medical marijuana. Okay? Now, what they tell me is it does really help with their pain, plus they sleep better at night. Okay? It is, if you have to take a painkiller, in my mind, it's miles better than an opioid or some of these others that I think the latest studies are finding that things like naproxen sodium, et cetera, actually are destroying the joint. Might kill your pain, but they're destroying the joint. So let's talk about what else works. Louis Simmons, he had ruptured several discs in his back, ruptured them. and was told that he'd be lucky to walk again without crutches, never mind set powerlifting records. Doctors told him surgery was the only option. And Louis Simmons, a high school dropout, but an absolute genius when it comes to biomechanics and training, he went home and he said, that really doesn't work for me. And he went about inventing the reverse hyperextension bench. The rest, as they say, is history. And he went on not only to walk again without crutches, but to continue setting world records. I lost count of how many he has in so many weight classes. While these machines are expensive, their price has come down in recent years. There was a time when the cheapest reverse hyper you could get was like $2,500. It was insane. I built one out of wood and some metal, but the price has come down. Rogue Fitness today makes one that's called the RH21 for around $600. That is a very solid investment in back health. Even if it takes some saving of money to do it, do it. Twice a week, 2 to 4 work sets of 15 to 20 reps. Light, when you're just getting into it light, just to pump some blood into the discs. And that is one of the things that a reverse hyper does. Discs, notoriously slow to heal. Why? Little to no blood flow. The reverse hyper gives you that. I can't, other than bridging.
In fact, Jance Footed, strongman Jance Footed came on this show.
Yep.
And we talked about a full motion x-ray video that he sent me of a guy using the reverse hyper, and you can see the lumbar spine moving as the guy is doing it, and you can see the L4, L5, S1 joints opening up and the disc plumping up with every single rep the guy did.
Yep. When the weight swings to a position below your face, like you said, it opens up the vertebrae.
It opens up the lumbar spine completely.
Yeah. It's a mild form of traction. And then on the reverse, when you're kicking back up, it is pumping fluid or blood into the spine and strengthening all of the tissues. Not many movements do that. Now, be that as it may, in my opinion, the absolute best exercise for back health is bridging.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, and this will be some of the best money you will ever spend. Order up the PDF or hard copy of Convict Conditioning, which does a masterful job of explaining how to bridge. Everything from the early steps, in the series, which even if you're severely injured, you can do those. They allow you to ease into it. And the results have been nothing short of miraculous for me. You're talking to a guy who was seeing a chiro 3 days a week, tried everything, acupuncture, acupressure, weird herbs, all this stuff, and I still had a glass back. It has been 15 years since I have had a bar on my back to squat. Provided I bridge just once a week, wall walks is what I do. It's a version of bridging. I feel that I now have the back of a 20-year-old again. And oh, by the way, bridging is free. Think about that. Now, as for ankylosing spondylitis, I actually train a woman that is afflicted by it. It's a form of arthritis that primarily affects the spine, although other joints can become affected. And this is really scary stuff, okay? It causes inflammation in these joints, but especially the spinal joints, that can lead to severe chronic pain and discomfort. In more advanced cases, and this is true in her case, that inflammation leads to new bone formation in the spine. In other words, it causes sections of the spine to fuse into a fixed, immobile position. Now, even scarier, it can happen in other joints too. She has a friend where the disease first attacked her jaw. It fused together. She can't talk now, nor can she chew food. She eats through a straw. It is also manifested in her ankles. So now she can't walk. And it usually comes out of nowhere later in life. In my client's case, it struck her down in her early 30s. Okay. Doctors told her there was nothing that she could do. Their plan was to watch it progress until it started fusing higher up in her spine. Then they told her, hey, we can perform surgery, which doesn't stop it, but it might help relieve the pain. So, and they also put her on Humira, which she couldn't really tell if it was making a difference. She had the surgery and nothing. She still has the pain. But here is what has improved the quality of her life immeasurably. And those are her words, not mine. Okay. Training. When we started together 6 months ago, a little more, she could not do a single bridge from the floor, not one. Today, she can do 20 with ease. And that's just one exercise. She's wall walking too now, all the way up and all the way down. And the rest of her exercises show similar improvement. I mean, dramatic. As a matter of fact, the only reason they were able to perform a surgery on her, and these are her doctor's words, not mine, was the fact that she was in such great shape.
Mm-hmm.
So to recap, here's what I would recommend. I would spring for a reverse hyper. Perform those twice a week, 2 to 4 sets, 15 to 20 reps to start. Bridging, you can start that right away, at least once and ideally twice a week, easing into it as per the steps in combat conditioning. There are 10 steps in every movement. Bridging is just one of them. Progressive resistance training, ideally body weight exercises in all the major muscle groups. Yes, we use a core exercise. In her case, it's hip belt squats, 20 rep hip belt squats or ladders. And that is the driver for every other movement we do, whether it's lower body or upper body. 4, BPC 157, either solo or with TB 500. 5, your GH releasing peptides. I do believe they work together with BPC 157. To be even better. I like mod GRF 129, no DAC, with GHRP, such as GHRP 2,6, ipamorelin, or hexarelin. Hexarelin, you got to be careful. Your body stops responding to that at the 3 or 4 week mark, so you need to switch to another one. And then finally, every day, I have 3 caps of tranquiligen that is loaded with curcumin and other natural analgesics and anti-inflammatory compounds. And unlike their drug counterparts, they don't tear down the joint and leave you worse off, even though you might not be in as much pain. Most importantly, I want you to remember this. It's one of Winston Churchill's most famous speeches, and it consisted of 9 words. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. He turned around and left the podium.
Says, I'm curious to know how you structure your workouts. Do you work full body, a split, or something completely different?
You know, I'll be honest, that's changed over the years, according to your goals, and, what works for one person might not work for the other. But I was explaining to my son recently that arrangement of your workouts and body parts and especially the exercises is important. It's real important, so to that end, these are my preferred parameters of my, consistent with my training goals. I train legs these days all by themselves, with particular emphasis on hamstrings. Those are a weak area for me. I do a lot of glute ham raises after squats, and then leverage squat, box squats and leverage squats. I train abs and calves every other day. I train them really hard. I do cardio almost daily, but this is important to point out. It's always after resistance training. You're strongest, right, when you're fresh. So do your resistance training justice, then do your cardio. I have another day where I just train chest and back. I have a separate day where I do a dedicated shoulder workout. I do no arm work, no direct arm work. But I also have a bridge day, wall walk only day to maintain and build my back health. My cardio varies between, sometimes it's long distance jogging. Other times it's pushing and pulling a heavy, with a heavy weight with a prowler. Other times it's sprinting with a lighter weight with the prowler. Then I have, days where I just take my dog for a walk or, for 30 minutes. And occasionally I'll have HIIT workouts on the treadmill or the bike. Every second or third week, also, I will perform top range rack pulls with a maximal weight. So if you think about it, I just have 2 or 3 days where I'm doing fairly heavy resistance training, and those are spread out quite a bit, over a long period of time. And it's important to note those days are not fixed. I perform those workouts when I feel that I'm ready for them, when I'm fresh and strong. You also need to take into consideration conditioning work and its effect on your other workouts. For example, when I push and pull the prowler heavy, 100 pounds, I'll load 100 pounds on, up and back, then 200, then 300, 400, and 500, and then back down, 4, 3, 2, 1. Trust me, after a workout like that, you won't be setting any new squat PRs the next day. It's far better to try that after a day of either jogging or just light walking. You should also have plans on what to do if you're not really feeling it when you get to the gym. For example, let's say, you plan to squat 400 pounds today. If everything you touch feels heavy from your warm-up set, then, don't fight it. Opt instead for a speed day, with 150 pounds plus some mini bands. It's still an intense workout and you still make progress towards squatting more weight. It's just you're working on the acceleration part of the force equals mass times acceleration equation. There's no point in getting squashed and physically and mentally defeated when there are other options. You also need to plan for injuries, right? They're a big part of this game.
Who gets injured?
Yeah, I know it, right? If you haven't been injured yet, just wait. You will. So
if you don't have an injury, I'll be able to lend a few of you one of mine and still have one left over for me to keep.
You should have a short list of movements that don't aggravate things, and be prepared to employ it. Right now, any type of push or pull movement with a heavy weight really hurts my shoulder. I've done one workout in the last 4 months for my upper body. Yet, I've lost almost nothing, okay, with no direct upper body work. How's that possible? I'm performing top range rack pulls. I think that has a lot to do with it, along with some lighter body weight stuff in aggressively pursuing big weights on the squat. You should also place your time under tension work after your strength work. I think no matter how you arrange your sets and reps, it's really, really beneficial that, let's say you structure it where you work to get a new PR on the squat. Okay. Once that's done, you proceed to another movement like leverage squats or even just the regular squat. Lower the weight and perform 2 sets of 5-second negatives in the 5 to 7 rep range. If you keep upping that over time, you will really, really see the weights take off and your legs grow. So here's the bottom line. You can perform some type of training almost every day, although more often than not, you're working small muscle groups in your conditioning, or at least I am as time goes on. Those things, however, understand that they should strengthen your ability to move bigger weights on your heavy days. And please don't forget your heart and lungs. Heart's a muscle too, maybe the most important one. So try that on for size, Gerald. I am sure that you will find that it helps, or some variation of such.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like it because you're able to train every day, and actually I have to. I am integrating more of that into my workouts now. Right. I got to tell you the truth. Only because I'm nursing so many injuries. Yesterday evening, Elisa wanted to go for a walk, and I didn't want to be a dud. And I says, "Oh, I'll go with you." And it's just our normal walk. It's like 40 minutes round trip, but it took a lot longer because I have to walk slow right now.
Right.
Between the pain in my left foot from walking, and now my right hamstring from this whatever I did to my hip last week, walking up hills was virtually impossible. I had to turn my knee in. I guess I was putting more stress on the inner hamstring by doing that.
Right.
I had to turn my knee in and keep my leg bent. I couldn't stretch it out and stride up the hill because the hamstring doesn't want to stretch. It's protecting itself right now.
Oh, I see.
But, I did it. I walked.
Good. Yeah, you can always do it. Can I just take a 1-minute break, maybe talk a little bit about Synthogen?
Yes, please.
Okay, just 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about all sponsors just for a second that make this show possible, but since we're not running commercials today. So, of course, Rob Regish has been a staunch ally of Superhuman Radio for a very, very long time, and his primary product we were just talking about, Synthogen, which is coming back in stock, and those of you who are crazy about it are waiting for it. But let's not forget Dr. Jeff Galini over at All American Pharmaceutical and their sports line, EFX, have fantastic products like Carbolin and Crealkaline. They make this show possible. In fact, Dr. Jeff is the title sponsor of the show now, which was a big deal for us to have a company be a title sponsor, because I was worried that they were going to want a lot of editorial control on the show, and he's let me do whatever I want to do with the show and has supported the show. Also, Cindy Nachman and Les Nachman over at the Live On Labs. I use their lipo vitamin C and lipoglutathione every day. You got to have those in your plan, and theirs are the best. Of course, PJ Braun over at Blackstone Labs. We promote his Trojan Horse product on the show, which is a mitochondrial uncoupler that helps you burn more fat. There is, of course, U.S. Wellness Meats, and that's John Wood, the best place to buy any animal protein, whether it be beef, pork, lamb, rabbit. They have it all humanely raised, all done the right way, so you can trust them. Let's see, who am I forgetting? Of course, Muscle Mass and their website, which is bodybuildingsupplements.com. Isn't that what his website is now, bodybuildingsupplements.com?
Yes, sir. Pretty easy to remember, huh?
John over there, and their Adaptogen N product, which is very, very popular, so give them some love. These are all companies that make it possible for us to do this show. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next question by Bo Wright. He says, I'm really into fat burners. I like the way they jack me up, crush my appetite, and make me feel. What's the best one, and where do I find it?
Yeah,
I like the jacked up. At least he's honest. I like the jacked up feeling. Yeah.
Oh boy, talk about a crowded market on this one, huh? Now, I need to preface this with what should be obvious, but all too often isn't. In order to burn fat, you need to either be in a caloric deficit, a near caloric deficit, or burning those calories via exercise in order, for those fat burners to work their magic. It does no good to get all jacked up during the daytime, or the afternoon or night for that matter, not be in a caloric deficit, not do any exercise, and then at the end of the day, all those fat, all the fat that was mobilized just redeposits as into your fatty tissue. So, if you really want to...
And not necessarily in the same place. So you may have just moved some fat from your ass to the side of your gut.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah, think of it that way. I don't like it over here. I want to put it over there. I know what I'll do.
Oh, God. you know, look, the way you should use them is, I think, I like thermogenics on an empty stomach prior to physical activity when insulin is low. Look, the common denominator in fat loss, low fat, low carb, low calorie, whatever, common denominator is keeping insulin low and or steady. I like them, like I said, fasted. I exercise, and then I wait for an hour or so when my goal is fat loss to have a low carb and lower calorie meal. Now, let's get on though to answering your specific question, which one is best? The best supplement combination for fat loss is, without question, ephedrine plus caffeine. It's the heavyweight champ. It has been for 20 years. It probably will be for another 20 years. Now, you will hear loud proclamations by companies claiming to have the strongest fat burner. Almost universally, it's a formula without ephedrine due to ephedra being banned for said purpose. Now, this is all frankly BS, and nothing holds a candle, like I said, to ephedrine caffeine, which is why I'm telling you it's EC. Unbeknownst to most is that ephedrine is as close as your local pharmacy. It's kept behind the counter and sold as Primatene tabs for asthma and related purposes. It's also in a product called Broncaid, but that, by label, is ephedrine sulfate, which I consider much inferior to ephedrine hydrochloride, which is found in Primatene. Each pill has 12.5 milligrams, and taking 2 of those along with 250 milligrams or thereabouts of caffeine is optimal, and it forms the base of your stack. It should be taken up to 3 times, but at least twice a day. Let's call it once in the morning when when you get up, another dose at noon, and another around 3 p.m. Most people don't want to take it past 3 because it tends to keep people awake.
Should you test lower doses to see what your tolerances are, or is 25 milligrams a pretty low dose where most people would be fine with that?
No, I much prefer, if they've never used it before, 12.5 milligrams is a great starting point.
And don't even take it with the caffeine yet. See how that feels by itself before you add the caffeine in, right?
Yeah, and in the event that you are taking 12.5 milligrams, shoot for 100 to 125 milligrams of caffeine. It's always, ephedrine caffeine has been found to be most effective in a 10-to-1 ratio. So if it's 20 milligrams of ephedrine, it's 200 milligrams of caffeine. You won't always be able to get it right on the money, but close enough is close enough. The actual best buy, though, for ephedrine per milligram per pill are 30 milligram ephedrine hydrochloride tabs, and those contain only ephedrine hydrochloride. Unfortunately, U.S. products containing ephedrine, including Primatene, also add a healthy amount, I want to say 400 milligrams of guafenicin. Okay, sad to say, it does take some of the stim effect away. They include it in there to make it more difficult, but not impossible, for the bad guys to use ephedrine as starter material for methamphetamine. Allegedly, that's why they want to control its distribution. You can only buy X amount when buying it through a pharmacy. You'll need to present your license, but in anyone that's using a reasonable amount, you can buy enough every 30 days. The 30 milligram tabs are available through a source that I made known to my BluePrint Bulletin folks. If you subscribe to it and you're not sure which issue it's in, email me, I'll get it to you. Anyway, back to ephedrine. Ephedrine happens to stack very, very well with things other than caffeine. But when starting from the standard, ephedrine plus caffeine, other options include EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate from green tea, L-tyrosine, Forskolin, it's actually shown to be synergistic with forskolin. It truly synergistic in that sense of the word. L-phenylalanine is another amino acid that goes well with it, and cimetidine hydrochloride. I will also tell you that Yohimbe can be useful, but understand this. Yohimbe by itself is powerful stuff. It has one of the widest dose response curves that I've seen out there for a nutritional supplement, meaning some people can take it and they feel fine. Other people, just the tiniest amount, 1.5 milligrams, will leave them shaky, trembling, paranoid, goosebumps that don't go away. Not fun, not a fun thing to experience. When you add Yohimbe to ephedrine and caffeine, it magnifies its effect about 10 times.
Yeah, I don't like Yohimbine. I don't like it. It makes me feel clammy. It makes me feel weird. I just don't like the way I feel.
I don't either. It is, however, one of the only compounds that usually gets stubborn female fat off, but
because it has a similar effect. It's a beta adrenergic antagonist, kind of like clenbuterol in that area.
Yeah.
But it's you know what? I don't feel that it's worth the effort. I really don't. I don't think Yohimbine is good. I really don't.
No,
I don't like it. Many people don't feel good on it. So
right. And consider this: ephedrine plus caffeine alone, very well-controlled studies, and these have been replicated all across the globe. Fat loss, not just weight loss, fat loss is about triple when using ephedrine caffeine versus placebo. And that isn't my opinion. That is per studies done at Beth Israel Medical Center, an arm of Harvard, Columbia University, and plenty of universities overseas. And here's the other thing you should know. These same studies show that ephedrine and caffeine, either in their pharmaceutical or herbal forms, are safe and effective when taken as directed. What do I mean by that? No more than, let's call it 90 milligrams a day of ephedrine. Okay. But I mean, these studies stand in direct contrast to the government's position on it. But let's be honest. If you had an over-the-counter product out there that was tripling the amount of fat loss in a population where obesity is skyrocketing, as a pharmaceutical company, wouldn't you want to get that off the market? Yeah. And that's exactly what they did. Again, not impossible to get it. Just know what your options are. It actually gets better than even safe and effective as directed. It is a boon to HDL levels. You will see a significant rise in your HDLs in your blood work.
Yeah.
So consider that when you're being pitched on the latest and greatest fat burner. And oh, by the way, you know, even Primatene, ephedrine plus caffeine, that is a lot cheaper than most of these fancy pants, you know, fat burners.
Rick Sheehan says, I'm diabetic and was recently diagnosed, not insulin dependent, but they want to put me on glucophage. What can I do to control this with diet and exercise?
Short answer to your question is a lot. In most people, a lot. I have several personal training clients that are diabetic, but they control it with just diet and exercise, no medication at all. And that's pretty profound when you think about it. So let's talk a little bit more about what I mean. When he first came to me, Russ, I'll call him, was 305 pounds at 6 feet tall. And he got the bejesus scared out of him by his diabetes diagnosis. But to his credit, he decided to try and control it through diet and exercise. His blood sugars, needless to say, were extremely high. His A1C was way out of whack. And in general, he was just a mess. He started out with very little knowledge about what to eat, how to train, etc. To his credit, he eventually got himself on a low carb diet and hired me as a trainer. So we sat down and came up with a plan. He began eliminating almost all. He wanted to do all, but I told him, I said, just go slow, manageable, eliminating the sugar in his diet. Of course, this meant reading food labels, but he does that and he sticks to it. If he goes out to eat or otherwise doesn't know how much sugar something has, he won't eat or drink it. It's that simple. He also began to moderate greatly his carbs. At first, it was just bread and pasta, which he was eating a lot of. It also included soft drinks, and I counseled him that should extend to so-called diet soft drinks as well. I consider those even worse. So within a few weeks, he lost a pretty staggering amount of weight. He also began exercising. So for a solid month, all I had him do was drag the sled up and back with heavier and heavier weights. He eventually built up to dragging his body weight for about 30 minutes, which I consider a minimum standard to start weight training. Why? Someone has to have a base work capacity in order to do a workout justice, and that's how you build it. Now, when that was developed, we started to dive in. His routine was anchored around a set of 20-rep breathing squats and pullovers originally, and then rounded out by some push-pull movements for a couple of hard work sets. He also eventually settled on that strict keto diet of just under 2,000 calories a day. And together, we kept at it for a little over a year as of right now. So today, Russ was 305. He's around 200 pounds, and he carries a lot of muscle on his frame. His legs, which were already big from carrying around all that weight, are enormous. And now they're as powerful as they look. His upper body, but especially his back, is replete with lots of muscle, and he's got great stamina to make it through some of these truly grinding workouts. He performs little to no traditional cardio, just some sled dragging and maybe a pickup game of basketball, I think he said at work. Look, there are no real secrets here. He cleaned up his diet. He stuck to it. He knuckled down to the really hard work in the gym consistently. And he stayed the course. So today, he's 100 pounds lighter. He looks like a completely different person. You had to see his picture on his license when he showed it to me. I couldn't believe it. And he's still gaining in strength in virtually every movement I throw at him. And this is on a keto diet of under 2,000 calories a day. He does all of that with no diabetes medications. He got off all of them. Not even a glucose disposal agent. And I'm not a fan of those. But if you have diabetes or otherwise blood sugar issues, I guess based on what I've read, it'd be berberine or RALA. But you know what? Try that on for size, Rick. I'm absolutely certain you will find it preferable to a lifetime of diabetes meds, including eventually insulin, loss of sight, amputations, and all the other nasty things that come along with diabetes. I used to work in the insurance factory, okay? I used to work closely with the actuaries. Actuaries are people that compile data and are able to a certain extent, predict things 10 years out, 15 years out. In diabetics, they know, 10 years out, the amputations, feet and fingers, or toes rather, start to happen, retinal neuropathy, loss of eyesight. It's just, God, if you've got this or even borderline, do something about it, because who wants to live a life like that?
Well, and you know what the funny thing is, a lot of people within the medical orthodoxy, when you start talking to them about low carb and diabetes and type 2 diabetes, which I like to call type 2 diabetes acquired diabetes, because you have to give it to yourself. You don't develop diabetes like a disease that you're genetically predisposed to. You have to live a certain lifestyle to develop diabetes. You have to eat uncontrollably. You have to put on a certain amount of body mass in the form of fat and change the inflammatory landscape of the body. You have to have a lot of carbohydrate consumption. You have to overburden the sugar management system, the pancreas, the liver, insulin production. And you have to do this for a very long period of time, not just a year or two, a decade or two, and then you're type 2 diabetic. And so you really have to work hard to give yourself diabetes. Type 2, not type 1. You're born with type 1, and that's an autoimmune disorder down their understanding. But the point is that when you go to the mainstream doctors and you say, low-carb lifestyle, they love to say, well, low-carb doesn't cure diabetes. And they're right. They're not lying. They're right. They'll say, well, you put the guy on low-carb and do it for a year or two, and then you feed that person a high-carb meal, they react like a diabetic. In a lot of cases, they're right. They're right.
Yeah.
But what they fail to acknowledge is their treatment does the same exact thing. It doesn't cure somebody of type 2 diabetes. It helps them manage their blood sugar. And if you took their drugs away, those people are full-blown diabetic again. Here's the difference, however. By cutting carbs out of your diet, you require less glucose management drugs. You won't need insulin in most cases. By reducing your carbohydrate consumption. We see that they have to prescribe your insulin based on how much carbs you eat. So if all of a sudden you say, I'm going to go from 800 grams of carbs a day to 400, your doctor has to prescribe less insulin. Otherwise, you'll end up in a coma. So, you use less insulin if you are insulin dependent, and eventually maybe not even need insulin if you can get your carbs down low enough. And have your pancreas actually react in a way that it can, and you stop all the wear and tear on your body that your type 2 diabetes is producing for you. And in that way, it's better than the drugs. And here's why. Because the drugs they give you have side effects. And you end up taking drugs to counteract the side effects from the drugs you're taking for your type 2 diabetes. So you're on blood pressure medicine now, and you need this, you need that. But when you do low carb, you're not on any drugs. You can, in most cases, if you're taking metformin, you can get off of metformin by eating less carbs, by making your body manage less blood sugar. And you're not on any drugs. So when the doctors say to try to slam the low-carb lifestyle as an alternative for managing your already in-flow type 2 diabetes, well, that doesn't cure diabetes. I would look back at them and say, and neither does glucophage or insulin.
Yeah.
These are all ways to manage the condition. Wouldn't you rather manage it with food?
Yeah, and you know what? However you do it. Because personally, I'm inspired by this guy. Quite a bit. And, it's funny, when he came to me, I said, Russ, what's your goal? And most people, right, they have goals. I want to squat 400. I want to get ripped and this and that, 3% body fat, whatever. You know what Russ's goal was? Russ wanted to wear a T-shirt and feel comfortable doing it. Yeah. And he and his wife are big fans of Disney. And the last time they went down there, he said, you know what? Not only did I wear a T-shirt, he says, I wore a tank top and I felt comfortable in my own skin. Think about it.
I remember the first time that I wore a wife beater T-shirt out in public after being 330 pounds. I remember it. I was shopping in the mall.
Yeah.
And I had a pair of jeans on and a wife beater. I just decided to run to the mall real quick to get a shirt.
Yep.
I was living in my bachelor apartment at the time. And I tell you, I remember standing in the store thinking, wow, I'm like in a tank top white T-shirt and I don't feel uncomfortable about it. In fact, I'm kind of proud about it. And I remember that moment because prior to that, when I was overweight, I went in the pool with a shirt on, a T-shirt on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want my big man titty showing. I don't want everybody looking at me like that. And so to be able to go out in public with a T-shirt, I understand that guy. I know exactly what he was talking about. That's wonderful.
Yep, great guy.
So what is the blueprint tip of the day, Rob Regish?
Well, tip of the day are our thoughts on age, injuries, and what this means for you. Because everybody listening is going to be impacted by this at some point.
Yeah, because you're going to get old.
yeah. You know, first things first. Anyone that's training long term, and I mean by long term, I mean for a lifetime, and we should all be training for life, is my position. It's invariable that you're going to get injured, you know, and the great blessing of youth dictates that you will suffer fewer injuries. They usually aren't quite as severe, and for sure, you recover a lot faster from them. So I wanted to come at this from the perspective of, you know, let's take a look at the injuries that I suffered, but more importantly, how I and you can overcome them. When I started training at age 15, way back in 1985, I didn't really think about injuries, or for that matter, even warming up. The only people I knew who got injured were old. And since I wasn't old, I paid no attention. In fact, because I trained in the basement of my parish rectory on universal machines. And because they were machines, I reasoned that I was less susceptible to injuries, which is a mistaken belief, as many of those machines lock you into very unnatural and disadvantageous positions. Still, it wasn't until I got to college that I saw and experienced injuries firsthand. So the very first time I tried deadlifting, at age 19, I pulled 365. It was a law student, though, in college who approached me afterwards with some friendly advice. He's like, man, you know, you pulled a lot of weight, and that's great, but try not to round your back so much. Of course, I didn't take his advice, and that would come back to haunt me less than a year later, because in the same gym, I was supersetting squats and deadlifts from a deficit. The deadlifts were done from a deficit, both to failure. I suffered a serious back injury, throwing my alignment out of whack. And I can still recall being devastated, not just physically, but psychologically. I can still recall sitting in church, praying to God and punching my lower back where it hurt. I guess maybe in the mistaken belief I was going to pop the bone back in place, until it swelled up the size of a goose egg. I remember leaning back against the pew and just feeling this huge knot on my back. Only later, when I was desperate, did I seek medical care in the form of chiropractic. It was a miracle, or so I thought, you know, at the time. It was, you know, it provided some relief, right, you know, and some was better than none. Other than that, you know, that was my only injury. It was my first and only throughout my 20s anyway. It was my only one. In my mid-30s, I went to unrack a bench press and felt the bar wobble. Really weird, I thought to myself. It was later explained to me that what I experienced was probably a mild to moderate shoulder separation. But I stupidly lowered it, and I tried completing the rep. And thank God I had the safeties set appropriately, because needless to say, I couldn't get it up. It took 3 weeks of CSIS, but I got over that injury in a month, and I went merrily on my way. Then in my late 30s, I was performing a set of heavy pullovers with an easy curl bar. And when I say heavy, I mean real heavy. It was like 240, 250 pounds. When I did something to my right elbow, it was a sharp pain, and although I never sought medical treatment, I'm fairly certain I thought I tore or pulled something. And it got better with rest, although I never used an easy curl bar again, and I went a lot lighter. Whenever those events would occur, and when I thought I was ready, I defaulted to things that I could do, like heavy dips and pull-ups, just one set to absolute muscular failure. Ironically, those were some of the greatest strength gains of my life. So understand, when an injury occurs and you maybe have to cut your volume down to just one set, of a different exercise, you can still gain and gain huge. Some of them will be the biggest breakthroughs of your training life. I never had any issues with my knees or shoulders, so I consider myself fortunate. Until that is, I severely bruised some tendons in my right knee. I was wrestling around with someone. I got pushed off the mat, and my knee came down hard on the floor, swelled up to about 3 times the size of my good knee. It took about a full year before it felt 100%. And I considered it more debilitating than blowing out my lower back for the reason that I mentioned earlier. If you blow out your back, you can still do versions of the squat. If you can't bend your knee, you're out of the squat business. Also during this time, my 20s and 30s, even through age 45, I would continue to throw my back out 2 to 3 times a year. And each time I did it, it was less traumatic than the first time because I had done it so many times. I was familiar with how to treat it, and I understood how to train around it. Still, each time I re-injured it, it felt a little more iffy. It'd be fair to say I had a glass back. And after your self-worth is wrapped up in your deadlift, that weighs very heavily on you. It devastates you. Fortunately for me, bridging has fixed my lower back to the point where I feel like I'm 18 again. And that's no exaggeration, which brings me to today, age 47, on my way fast to 48, moderate to severe arthritis in this right elbow, internal impingement in the right shoulder. The right elbow I can deal with. I mentioned before, going to use GLC 2000, actistatin. I have high hopes. Shoulder, I still need to have an MRI or a CAT scan done, maybe both. I forget what the doctor said. One thing you should know. In over 3 months of no upper body work, I've lost no strength and no size, as validated by the tape measure. Now, how do I explain this? Simple. I doubled down on my leg work, upping my squat. Legs, one of the biggest muscle groups in the body. Lots of bridging, and I built that top range rack pull up to nearly 900 pounds. You tell me. Are your muscles going to get smaller trying to hoist weights like that? No. If anything, some of them appear to have gotten bigger. Certainly my legs. The experience has also taught me this. Once the shoulder is 100%, I needn't perform upper body movements once a week. Even once every 10 days, I don't need to do it. Or maybe even once a month, at least to maintain, okay? Far less frequent training is necessary for the upper body, provided you've been doing this for a long time. You're working your lower body hard as you can and taking advantage of movements using partials as static holds. Look, it took me 30 plus years to develop the muscle that I have. It's not going to go away in a few weeks, months, etc., etc.
Right.
Okay. And it was done naturally. I got up to 252 with nothing but creatine. Here's the bottom line. You will get hurt in this game, sometimes severely. But you have a choice insofar as how to deal with it. You can either quit, get down and frustrated, or look for solutions, some of which will yield the greatest gains of your training life. Things like I talked before, 1 set to absolute muscular failure, unorthodox movements that most people don't even think of or perform, partials, static holds, extremely infrequent training. How many people have experimented with that? Almost none. And of course, body weight movements, which I'm always hammering on. You should, you show me the guy in a cast who's training, and I will show you someone who will ultimately gain and gain big. In fact, I'll go one better on you. In one of the gyms that I train at, there is a double amputee, both legs, above the knees. He wears a single prosthetic. He gets around on crutches, and get this, he trains the one and only stump he has on the leg press, and he trains it hard. Think about that the next time you get injured. Because if he can train hard and still make progress, you can too.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Tip of the day.
All right, so there you have it. This show is done. It's a Facebook Live only show with no commercials. And I found a way to get this up on Patreon. I'll put it up on our YouTube channel and all that sort of stuff too. Thank you, Coach Rob Regish. Go to
Thank you.
CoachRobRegish.com to learn more. Synthogen can be gotten where?
At bodybuildingsupplements.com or Synthogen, SYNTHAGEN.com.
And you are taking pre-orders right now, right? Because the stock is coming in.
We are taking pre-orders, first come, first serve. So when it does come in, ultimately, there's going to be a line. So if you need it, please get into it.
All right, we'll see everybody I think Dr. Jeff and I will be doing this tomorrow because the server should be delivered tomorrow, and the guys upstairs promised me that they could get it up and running within a few hours.
Yep.
So I predict that moving forward from Thursday on, we'll be back to normal. But that's all we've got today. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, Carl.